It's time for my favorite Pokemon Pocket video of the week. I've combed through thousands of deck lists looking for the sweetest things that put up solid results this week. Let's dive on into talking about the Lake Trio, Promo Floatzel, and so much more in this week's new decks roundup. I'm never one to bury a lead, and you heard that right. The Lake Trio had an 8-3 top 16 finish in the almost 800 player Ursi Day tournament this past weekend. Two of each Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf being paired with Giratina EX for a bunch of one knockout point lead Pokemon that can occasionally get in a big blast for 160 alongside Giratina charging itself up in the back to be your alternative finisher. I especially love the incredibly cheeky copy of Dawn as a supporter in here, as that allows you to utilize Giratina's charging alongside Mesprit to get an early Supreme Blast of 160 damage in, letting you take down an opposing Darkrai or Giratina a turn before your opponent is expecting to start getting hit. While the big payoff for the trio is obviously Mesprit getting to deal large chunks and score your first knockout, while Giratina can come in and clean up, I think it's worth pointing out that Azelf being able to start dealing chip shots on the board works well with Giratina as well. The 130 on Giratina often comes up a little bit short, which is why you often see it paired with copies of Red and Darkrai in the popular decks, and Azelf can serve a similar role, softening up your target so Giratina can go ahead and finish them off in one go. Up next, we have a Promo Floatzel Wug Trio EX amalgamation that went 5-2 in the Pocket Legends League over this past weekend. In theory, I think Floatzel is likely competitive or close to it, dealing 70 damage for 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon is a fairly competitive rate, as we've seen Weavile EX show up in and around the top of the metagame in the past. Getting to do it on a single knockout point Pokemon is definitely something worth exploring. In theory, Wug Trio's damage spread out around the board, or Articuno's Blizzard dealing chip shots to bench Pokemon, means that when your Floatzel comes up, it's going to regularly be dealing 70 a lot of the time. My only concern when looking at this particular deck list is that the mix of EXs alongside the single knockout point Floatzel might be awkward in some spots, since your opponent's frequently only going to have to take 2 knockouts in order to win the game against you. Next up, we have a Probo Pass EX Wormadam metal variation that went 5-2 in the Swiss rounds of the tournament it was played in. Wormadam is a card that's had some competitive results in previous Pokemon Pocket formats, and I think it's pretty solid, dealing a minimum of 50 for 2 with the ability to high roll half of the time up to 80 and occasionally deal massive amounts of damage with a good string of coins is quite potent, especially when you pair it with the fact that you're getting a 110 HP stage 1 body that also has the flexibility to retreat for just a single energy. I think the only thing a little surprising to me about this particular deck list is that I was only able to fit in a single copy of Skarmory, which I think is a quite potent card in this metagame. A lot of the time, I think this deck list wants to set up going one knockout point, and then finishing on Probo Pass EX. So in most games, you either want 2 Wormadans or a Wormadan and a Skarmory before Probo Pass ends up getting moved into the active spot to close things out for you. Next up, we have a Togekiss Sigilif variation that went 5-2 in the tournament it was played in. I think Togekiss in particular is a potentially well-positioned aggressive card in our somewhat dirtily metagame. The Darkrai Giratina decks need 3 turns off essentially of charging Psychic Energy onto Giratina before they get going, which means if you have first evolution advantage with your Togekiss while going first, you're going to get to go ahead and hit them for 40 on your Togetic, and then the Togekiss can get charged up by Cynthia to do 60 plus 50, clearing out even a 150 HP lead, and then your Togekiss is revved up and ready to go, ready to get smashing for 120 every single turn for the rest of that game. This card is also a non-EX Pokemon, which means it's going to line up really solidly into all of the Meowscarada decks that are running around as well, trying to gain an advantage over EXs like Giratina. A Blaine deck featuring 2 energy, Ninetales, and Rapidash has a 5-2 finish in the Swiss rounds of the Pocket Legends League tournament this past weekend. I don't think it's a coincidence that these single knockout point decks featuring aggressive early attackers are finding success in a variety of forms, whether it's Wormadam or Togekiss or Rapidash and Ninetales backed up by a potent supporter. I think one of the interesting ways that you can be attacking this metagame is the ability to be hitting hard and fast early, not giving these dirtily Giratina decks the proper time to fully get set up. I also think the fire typing is particularly enticing on this deck in particular because the Meowscarada decks have been one of the premier counters to the Giratina Darkrai decks in the metagame so far, and having a weakness advantage into them means that a Ninetales alongside of a Blaine clears out even a stage 2 Meowscarada in a single go. Up next, we have a Wheezing Koga sighting finishing 5 and 3 in the Ursi Day tournament this past weekend. Wheezing's Pokemon ability lets you set up poison on the opponent's active, allowing your Clodsire to go ahead and deal absolutely massive amounts of damage. I think one really interesting dynamic with Wheezing and Clodsire in the same deck is Clodsire is a card that really enjoys going second with its stage 1 with a potent 2 energy attack, while Wheezing is a card that really enjoys going first, being a stage 1 with a 1 energy attack and a solid Pokemon ability. This deck is also getting to utilize 1 copy of Darkrai as another potential finisher that you can be building up behind your copy of Wheezing when your Clodsire either isn't good enough or is nowhere to be found. Up next, we have a Berry Snorlax variation featuring Giratina EX as its third basic. While Giratina can obviously be an attacker in its own right, in this particular deck list, its primary purpose is to serve as a battery alongside the Dawn supporter to get your Snorlaxes attacking early and often. In the games where your berry is nowhere to be found, you can charge up your Giratina using its Pokemon ability and then send that energy up to Snorlax to get it attacking on the turn you attach your third energy instead of waiting for longer. This deck list is also all in on having the maximum amount of sustain on its sleepy Pokemon, featuring 2 copies of Giant Cape and 2 copies of Pokemon Center Lady, which not only can keep Snorlax nice and healthy, but can also wake it up should you fail to sleep coin flips in a row. This deck list is especially chunky, making your opponent get through 240 HP single point leads, as well as your Giratina EX at the end of it all to try and clinch victory in a given game. Up next, we have Lucario EX making a sighting with a 5-3 finish in one of our community tournaments this week. It's being played alongside a Pseudo Wudo and a copy of Aerodactyl EX in this fighting amalgamation. A lot of singletons in this deck list, including 1 of each Lucario, which I would presume gives you the flexibility to either go Pseudo Wudo, Baby Lucario finish on EX Lucario, or Pseudo Wudo, Baby Lucario finish on EX Aerodactyl, depending on how exactly your draw lines up, following that pretty typical 1-1-2 knockout point sequence that we see in a lot of Pokemon Pocket's most successful decks. Last but certainly not least, while Magnezone Meowscarada is definitely the talk of the town coming out of this tournament weekend, there were a handful of other Meowscarada variations that put up solid results as well. Finishing 5 and 3 in the Ursi Day tournament, we have this Vespiquen Spirit Tomb variation, as well as one simply playing 2 copies of Farfetch that put up solid results. Regardless of what you pair with the cat, it's definitely one of the most potent anti-meta cards you can be playing right now, with Giratina and Darkrai getting increasingly popular in our tournaments, and likely the latter as well week over week. What sweet deck lists have you been finding success with in Pokemon Pocket? I finally pulled myself all the way up to Masters, and rather than obsessing with trying to get to the top 10,000, I think I'm just gonna chill and try out a bunch of the sweet decks that I've covered here today, as well as other chat suggestions over the course of the week. I would love to hear in the comments down below for what you think would make an excellent and fun highlight on the channel in the future. If you enjoyed my roundup today, be sure to smash the like button on this video, and if you happen to be new here, consider subscribing to the channel and coming back again. We do both meta and off-meta deck roundups like this every week, and I'd love to see you back again sometime. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of today's video, and hope your next pack is an excellent one.